Thank you so much, team. I'm super excited to be here to chat with you. And we actually have Becky Dunham is on the call as well, and she has taken agriculture informed therapy. So it's wonderful to see one of our therapists on the team today. And thank you to your sponsors as well. I know you go through a formal thank you, but as a speaker, I'm always so appreciative of sponsorship of organizations that see what you're doing and the great work that you're doing. So thank you. I am going to go ahead and just share my screen. I'll provide a little bit of an outline, and forgive me because I'm not as Zoom friendly as I used to be. So if this doesn't work, feel free to hail me down. Are you able to see that? And you'll have to answer verbally because I can't see you anymore.
Yeah, it looks.
Yes. Yeah. It looks good. Okay. All right. So we are going to go through, we're going to chat about agriculture informed therapy. This training it does provide 12 continuing credit hours through the Canadian Counseling and Psychotherapy Association. So we don't have certification in the US. We're working on that process. However, so far, all of our US therapists have, the training has been accepted as continuing education credits. So just thought I'd throw that out there real quick because of the conversation that just preceded me beginning this chat. So we are going to talk about resilience and coerced resilience. And we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive. Before we get there, I'll tell you just a little bit about who we are and why we started. Um, Place matters. Living in a rural area, it matters. We face additional barriers. I am a sheep farmer in southwestern Ontario, and we have therapists all across Canada and the US, and we have some in the UK as well. And what we find, a shared experience is living in rural areas is actually a determinant of health. Rural children are 4 to 6 times more likely to die by suicide than urban children. And we will be talking about some hard stuff today. So if you need to kind of step away, that's totally fine. But we do need to ensure that we understand kind of the gravity of the situation facing farmers. Certainly, I'm sure you are all aware or that right now in the US, there's some droughts and fires, and it feels as though for many farmers that we've talked to, that it's a real struggle. It's a real struggle right now to be able to continue to do what they do and do so well. So we are a group of master's level trained therapists and social workers and allied health professionals, and we seek to continue to develop a community of practice. Our organization is based on 4 pillars. We provide nationally recognized, culturally informed training for therapists. So that is agriculture informed therapy. We also do grief groups and a number of other accredited trainings. We provide direct counseling services to farmers and their families. We participate in research, and we partner with stakeholders in agriculture. So kind of what we're doing today. A couple of our current projects I'll just go over real briefly is that community practice with agriculture informed therapy. So each of the members who take agriculture informed therapy, they're able to receive referrals from our organization. And we also participate in a community practice. So we have an opportunity to do peer supervision and, really work together on a regular basis to support one another. We work with Seed Peace, which operates out of Colorado and Virginia, and we provide direct counseling services for regenerative farmers in those areas. And we are looking for additional therapists. So if you know of anybody who offers in-person counseling in Virginia or Colorado, please do reach out. We just completed our last grief after suicide support program. This program is restricted to 8 participants at a time because it's a very intimate, vulnerable place to be when we talk about such a deep loss. And so that is one of the programs that we offer, and we do have one starting, we believe, in the fall in the US. And it's held virtually, but we do have some individuals in Colorado and Virginia and a few other areas that have asked for the program. Lastly, we have a Bee Farm Well app. It's about to be launched, so stay tuned. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get the word out to you. It is an app for therapists, both for therapists and with farmers. There's audio blogs and podcasts. There's a reward system so that folks, we see that behavioral modification through a reward system. There's self-directed and self-inventories. It's really a really neat tool. We're really excited for it. So I would encourage you to check it out. A little bit about myself. I am a registered social worker. I'm a PhD student at the University of Guelph. I do my qualifying exam in August, so I will move from student to candidate. I am a sheep farmer and I'm a bakery owner, and I'm also a foster mom. We have a foster daughter who has brain cancer, and we have a foster son who has Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. So both are wheelchair dependent, and our home, when we built it wheelchair accessible for kids who struggle with some medical needs. And so it certainly keeps us hopping, but it's a joy. I unfortunately I can't see. I really wish there was a way that I could see you. I don't know if I can. Maybe I'll just know. I don't think it'll work, and I don't want to change anything. So if there's any questions, I really love it when it's more of a discussion. So feel free to pop a question up in the chat box, and then
They
Carrie or
can
someone
also
else.
unmute if unless you don't want to be interrupted, we can have
That's
them put
great.
it in the
No.
chat and Carrie or I will.
Yeah, absolutely. Unmute and just ask, because I actually
Okay.
kind of challenge people, like throw me off my game. Don't be afraid to kind of challenge me. Um, and I've gone through and I've tried to implement as many US statistics and US information as I can, but when you notice Canadian, just kind of blink and grin a little bit, and we'll move on. There's a lot of similarities we find, but obviously there's some distinct differences as well. The definition of reality in Canada, it's at least 1,000 residents with a density of 400 or more per square kilometer. So a kilometer would be less than a mile, probably about 0.75. But what the real piece that I want to share with you is it's socially constructed. In other words, we have farmers all the time who move from a rural area into an urban area, for instance, later in life when they require some hospitalization or hospital care. And they will still identify as a farmer or as a member of a rural community. And so it's important for us to understand that it's socially constructed. It's really not based on a specific definition. In fact, if you were to take an inventory yourself, whether you live in a rural area or not, there's a connection. Like my grandfather was the butcher in the town that's about 5 minutes from where I live now. Excuse me. My uncle was a veterinarian there. So when people learn my maiden name, they immediately say, "Oh, are you Doc Parr's granddaughter?" I said, "No, I'm his great niece." And I'm able to say, my grandfather. There's this social connection and this social agreement that we have, and our identity is very much tied to our community and our heritage there. The conceptualization of health, it's defined as a dynamic state between which encompasses interconnected physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual dimensions. We're not talking about the absence of illness here. We're not talking about the absence of hardship or stress. What we are talking about is a relationship with self and with others, with the land, with the community. So it's very, the way that we conceptualize health at the National Farm Mental Health Alliance is a large view, right? We're really looking for an understanding of health has all these different pieces of our puzzle. And how can we support all of those different pieces of the puzzle? It certainly is supported by barrier-free and stigma-free care. The other thing for the research, as you would know, across the board has said that farmers need rural specific care. They need farm informed care or agriculturally informed care. Um, there was some really good research that came out of Australia a number of years ago, not too many years ago, I think 2021, by Caitlin Viro. And if you ever get a chance to read her papers, I strongly, strongly encourage it. She really did some great work in understanding the connection between the farm and health and the barriers that exist and why they exist. At the National Farm Mental Health Alliance, we support the two continuum model. And the reason for this is it's important for people to understand that you can have a diagnosis of a mental illness and yet still thrive. And you could not have a diagnosis of mental illness and still exhibit illness like qualities. So in other words, the diagnosis itself, we can understand. Oftentimes, you'll see a continuation model where we go from green is healthy, and then we have yellow, and then we have orange, and then we have red, and red feels diagnosis, and there's follow up, and so you have that continuum, the mental health continuum. And we don't really ascribe to that continuum. It's a bit of a barrier when we talk with farmers, because farmers in general are very afraid of a diagnosis, of a mental health diagnosis. And so that continuum to them looks like, if I get a diagnosis, I'm in the red category and I'll never get back to that green category. And so we avoid diagnosis, we avoid that labeling. The continuum model is meant to educate people to say, you can have a diagnosis and you can still thrive. You also can have you can not have a diagnosis and struggle. And so the idea behind this to continuum model is to really educate and help with that stigma reduction and understanding that a diagnosis is not a terminal diagnosis, right? We don't lose everything at that point. And I think part of the reason why that's so important in our area, for instance, I was interviewing some farmers, or actually my team was interviewing some farmers. And one of the farmers said, I made a really big mistake. And I said, well, what was that mistake? And he said, well, I allowed myself to get diagnosed with depression. And I was like, okay, like, of course, I'm like, you allowed yourself, like, help me understand, what is this? And he said, well, I got diagnosed with depression, and my neighbor who knew, I was struggling a little bit, he came over and I told him I got diagnosed with depression, and, that I've got some medication, and I'm really trying, I'm really working at things, but it's been hard. And he said, my neighbor then went to all of my area farmers with whom I had contracts and told them that I had been diagnosed with depression. And he said he scooped out about 8 of the 10 contracts that I had with the area farms. He said, because, he went to them and said, oh, I'm really praying for Bob. I'm going to call him Bob. I'm really, so Jerry is the farmer that went to the neighbors. And so Jerry said, oh, I'm really praying for Bob. Bob got diagnosed with depression. We just really need to be praying for him. But then he said to them, he said, he might not be able to get your beans planted in time, and he might not be able to get the harvest on because he's really struggling with depression. So, you might not make the money this year, but Bob's a good guy. But you know what, maybe we should help him out a bit. How about I take over your contract, and that would take more pressure off Bob, and et cetera, et cetera. And so Bob lost a number of those contracts. And so that's one of the reasons for farmers why they're afraid of that diagnosis, afraid of that identity piece, that labeling piece. And so we teach the 2 continuum model. I want to talk with you real quick about resilience. It's a term that's flown around. If I were to ask you right now, when you think about the term resilience, what is it generally applied to? I'm just going to go ahead and unmute yourself. What do you hear people say when it comes to resilience?
Being able to go with the flow.
All right, go with the flow. Yep. And where does that apply? Does that apply just to a person, or does it apply to other things?
Everything.
Everything, yeah. How many of you have heard the term, we have to have resilient kids, or we have to have resilient families, we have to have resilient communities? And then we switch and we say we have to have resilient farms, we have to have resilient farm machinery, we have to have resilient finances, we have to have resilient churches, and we have to have, like, the term resilience has been applied to so many different areas. And the problem with that is we've really lost an understanding of what is resilient, what does real resilience look like? What does it really mean? And so it's important that we understand it refers to the capacity of individuals and systems to navigate adversity, but using flexibility. And we develop skills, we pivot, we adapt, we reach out for help, we foster healing, we look for connection and growth. That's resilience. It's an authentic form of resilience. Unfortunately, what we see in agriculture is we see coerced resilience all the time. Coerced resilience is it's a constrained adaptation, right? So it's where we chase production. As a farmer myself, I chase production. I mean, it's what my livelihood depends on. If I don't make money if my sheep only have 1 lamb per year. In fact, I will lose money. I will lose the farm, kind of thing, if we only have 1 lamb per year. So I chase production. I need 2 lambs on average per yo to be able to justify and see the farm grow. So because I'm focused on that production, coerced resilience means we have a high level of productivity. We can complete the task. We get the job done, but we do it at the expense of concealing our emotional, our psychological, and our systematic struggles, right? So it underlines performance. And talking with farmers, so many of them, when I ask them about their job, very much, it's about, when struggles come, I just kind of put my head down and I keep going when struggles come. And so that's coerced resilience. The problem with coerced resilience is we function for a long period of time at that place of coerced resilience, but then it's a steep decline. We see farmers who look like they have thrived and thrived and thrived. Their businesses are expanding. They're hiring more workers. They're taking over more land. They're educating themselves. But it's all leading to burnout because it's a form of coerced resilience and not an authentic form. And we see a quick flip in those farmers. I'm not sure. Are you able to see me talking? Or are you only able to see the slide?
We can see you.
I can see you talking
Oh,
up above.
okay, that's nice. Well, I mean, maybe, hopefully. All right. So in the US, 32% higher risk of suicide than other rural occupations. Nearly 30% of American farmers meet the criteria for depression, 27 meet the criteria for anxiety. This is a research that was done by Borgested. Now, it's important to note that there's other research that would say these numbers are higher. I typically will quote the lower statistics. I don't know if that is helpful or not helpful. I'm very cautious about throwing out a lot of those high numbers. In Canada, we've had some research that's come out that has thrown out some really, really high numbers. And the problem with that is when farmers look at those high numbers, they kind of throw it away. They kind of say, well, no, that's not reality. We just throw it away. And because of the way that research and statistics are done, we have to be really careful with how we utilize statistics. By and large, what I would like you to know is it's a major concern. Like the suicide rate in the US for farmers is 4 times likely, 4 to 5 times. Some people would say 5. I tend to say 4 times in the general population. And some people might look at that and say, oh, 4 times, that's not that much. I'm like, okay, well, here's the deal. If we were talking about 1 farmer per 20 people, right? If that was the suicide rate, 1 farmer. And then we say, well, it's 4 times higher. That's 4 farmers per 20 people. It's significantly higher. In my whole hometown county, between November 2020 and December 2021, we had 7 farmers die by suicide or members of the farm family that had moved away. So they were still pretty directly connected to the farm. 7 individuals. That's out of about 128,000 people. That's a huge number. And what many people don't realize is rural kids are 4 to 6 times more likely to die by suicide than urban kids. I think I mentioned that statistic earlier. That's a huge number. And what we don't see is the number of farmers who are injured, both on like a farming injury or those that have died due to a farm accident that may have in fact been a suicide attempt or completion. Those statistics are very hard to get access to, although in conversation, in some of the research conversations we've had, certainly is a reality. Women in ag, 30.4% of farmers identify as female. Women are generally underrepresented in agriculture industry meetings, but you have a U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Brooke Rollins, Holly King, she's the chair of the Almond Board in California, Carolyn Zern, president of the American Agri-Women. So this is changing. We are seeing more women step into these roles in agriculture. One of the biggest pieces that you need to know is women are more likely to be depressed and anxious, over double their urban counterparts. Post-COVID, we saw the greatest decline in rural women's self-reported health. More than rural men, more than urban women, more than urban men. Women have seen the greatest decline. Now, some people would say, oh, well, it was because during COVID they had to homeschool their kids. I'm telling you that is not the reason why we've seen this great decline. One of the reasons for this great decline is women are their sole support for their spouse. So and I'm speaking from more of a traditional concept right now, it applies to other concepts. So, but forgive me if I'm, speaking from a traditional lens and it's not ringing true, but from a traditional lens, you have a man who is a farmer and he solely depends on his wife for the stress he's feeling. Every day there's stress. Every day there's how are we going to pay the bills? Every day there's all of these pieces that come back. And unfortunately, what we see is a number of rural men will say to their wives, don't tell anyone. Don't tell my brother. Don't tell my mom and dad. Don't get help. In fact, I've sat with people who have, said to me, well, he attempted suicide. I found him out in the barn. And again, I'm being just really honest with you. There's ligature marks around his neck. And in my head, I was like, okay, good. We finally got him help. You called 911. You got him help. No, he wouldn't let me. Wouldn't let me even tell his brother, that kind of thing. So the reality is women are experiencing a form of vicarious trauma in a number of situations because they're the spouse's sole support. So real quick, just shout out for me, what are some of the issues that farmers face? Here it says Saskatchewan farmers. We're going to say American farmers. I'm going to apologize because that should have been clipped out of there. But what are some of the farmers, some of the issues that our US farmers are facing?
Government regulations.
Yep, for sure. Anybody else?
Exponentially increasing input costs, fertilizer, feed, etc.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Someone
Oh,
said
man.
isolation.
Isolation. For
Isolation
sure.
in the chat.
Yep, isolation. Good. Anything else?
Succession planning.
Big. Succession planning is very big, very challenging. We have farmers who don't want their kids taking over the farms because of the stress that they've experienced. They're saying, no, get off the farm, go to something else. We've got kids who want to take over the farm, but the amount of debt that they would be saddled with is a huge, huge issue, right? For sure. Yep. I didn't hear anybody mention weather. Do you think weather is a huge source of stress?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Number one, I would say. It's what we do.
Yeah.
Look at the weather every single day.
It's right. Every morning, right? The first app I open is my weather network. And I think, oh man, I'm more married to my app than I am to my husband sometimes because right, I'm checking that weather before I'm checking on how was your sleep, dear? Right? So yeah, we check that weather. Notice how many of these things are outside of farmers' control. Government regulations, outside farmers' control. The weather, outside farmers' control. Input costs, outside of a farmer's control. Now, the two there that were mentioned, isolation and succession planning, they do have some control over those. However, isolation, I would argue, has very little control because of where we farm and their proximity. We live in the loneliest region of the world, North America. Our self-reported level of loneliness is extremely high. And now we can be connected through our phones, but our sense of belonging, our sense of being known by one another, our sense of vulnerability with one another is very, very low. Now, one of the reasons for that is what I would call generational trauma. Post-World War II, we had a number of folks that immigrated to the US and to Canada. Post-World War II. Now, after World War II in the Netherlands, does anybody know what happened? So it was after World War II was over, but then something happened in the Netherlands after World War II. They had a great famine. A great famine. They were eating tulip bulbs and wallpaper to kind of get by. And the US kind of came to them and said, listen, we will take some of your farmers. He also went to the US also went to the Jewish, but said, we will take some of your Jewish folks. But in the Netherlands, a lot of Eastern folks came. And unfortunately, during that time, they were in survival mode. They had trauma. And when they came to the US, they continued to stay in that place of trauma. And so what we know now is trauma carries down the DNA for 4 to 6 generations. Gabriel Mate would say 7 generations. And that's if no further trauma occurs. I was working with Brian Retzinger. I'm not sure if any of you have read his book, Land Rich, Cash Poor. I don't know if you've had him on to talk yet. You should. He's fantastic. But some of the pieces that we talked about was that generational, even when we have had, number of farmers will say, oh, I'm farming the land my great granddaddy farmed, right? I'm kind of in that situation. I farm where my great grandparents immigrated. And so the reality is, though, if you're familiar with the 80s crisis, if you're familiar with the Depression, if you're familiar with all of those tragedies or all of those very difficult experiences for American farmers, that holds true. It actually passes down the DNA. It's like a phenotype, and it passes down the DNA. And so we're impacted by that stress that occurred. Now, post World War II, what we see is a number of young farmers now, because their grandparents were in survival mode, that second generation down they're having trouble with relationships. And it grows that sense of isolation because You've got farmers who are 80 years old who are still farming that are still stuck in survival mode. Now, the other piece I want to chat with you about is chronic stress. Contributing factors of chronic stress is unpredictable weather, as we mentioned. I do want to switch and get into agricultural informed therapy. As you know, there's barriers to receiving care, accessibility supports, urban areas. There's, as far as our resources are very low in those urban areas. One of the other pieces is the perception of professionals believe about farmers and the reflection. What do you believe about farmers? What do farmers believe about what do farmers think you believe about them? This is a major area for you as a professional, because so often we sit down with farmers and farmers think the professional thinks they're, an education, or the professional thinks they're, really, really wealthy because we're land rich, cash poor, right? And so there's a number of barriers to receiving care. Understand that it can be hard to leave and end the relationship when it comes to farm couples. That's another piece of the puzzle. All of this is covered in our agriculture informed therapy. But one of the pieces that we run into is we have higher levels of intimate partner violence in rural areas, right? We have in Canada, it's up to 30 times more common to see, 30% more likely to have experienced intimate partner violence than in those urban counterpart areas. So significantly higher. And part of the reason for that, as you mentioned, is that piece around isolation. Another piece that we talk about is substance use in agriculture. It's an accepted form of coping. There certainly is a higher prevalence of risky alcohol consumption, heavy drinking, addiction is often a symptom of those underlying. It's present in 25-30% of completed suicides. As we've talked about resilience, I'm rushing through this because I'm going to close this presentation out and just chat about agriculture informed therapy. Let me just come back here, and real quick, if you have any questions about what I presented so far, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and feel free to ask me some questions. And in the meantime, unless it has the other gentleman joined? No. Okay.
Oh.
So in the meantime, while you're asking questions, I'm just going to pull out another presentation that will help us go through AIT. Oh,
Someone asked if you could share the research about the ag-aware mental health care. I'm not sure which slide it was. Or would you be willing to share the slides after the fact so we can send them out to the attendees?
absolutely. I'll just share this.
Okay.
I'll just share what I have. Yeah. We typically don't do that, but in this situation, because I think it'll be easier for you just to share those out with attendees.
Okay,
I'm
or
not
you can
sure.
also attach it as a file in the meeting too, in the chat.
Okay. Let me go through it first. There might be a few pieces that I want to change to make sure it's reflected of the American experience. And then I'll send it to you and you can send it out to folks. Does that work?
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fine. Thank
Okay.
you.
Somebody said about the research with agricultural, what was that other mental health, or what, agri-care? Is that what it was? What was that piece? Maybe. Oh, I see all sorts of comments here.
Ag-aware mental health care.
I was the one who
Ag-aware.
asked that question. Early in your presentation, you mentioned some research, and I'm driving, but there's nobody on the road. I'm in rural Kansas. And so I didn't get to write it down, and you said it was just really, truly phenomenal. So I was curious about that.
Ah, yes. That's out of Australia, and her name's Caitlin Viro. I will send her name when I send through all the information, if that's okay. And I'll put a link to her research.
Thank you. And someone just asked in the chat, they'd like to know more about the divorced couple slide you were briefly on.
Okay. All right. Well, let me see. How are we doing for time here? I will hop back to that if you'd like. It is really thoroughly covered in agriculture informed therapy. So what I'll do, actually, I'll switch over to agriculture informed therapy. And then we can talk about those pieces there. Just let me find that slide deck. My apologies here.
And you're good. We got
ask me questions
25 minutes.
Great. Okay, so I'm just going to apologize in advance if it doesn't appear as US friendly as what it could or should, but we'll still get to the information we really want to get to, okay? Okay, can everybody see that? Agriculture informed therapy?
It's just showing Zoom.
Oh, we did it again. I think I hit the wrong one. I'm not sure why Zoom is changing on me. I wonder if maybe I'm using the web form and maybe I need to be online. Okay, so it's sharing the screen. Share this screen. Now let me see if it goes to the other. Are we there?
Yes.
Okay.
You're not in presenter mode though. It's not. There you go.
Okay.
Looks great.
Good. Okay, we're gonna breeze through these first ones. We've already covered those. Okay, so this is going to give you a really brief outline of the tiers. Okay, so module 1 is issues farmers face. We go into great detail about the issues that we just briefly went over. We talk about farming facts. Now, I'll be honest with you, agriculture informed therapy right now is Canadian based, and I'm really excited. We have a US director. Her name is Colleen Stragenja. And we also have another gal who is coming on. And so this will be changed to our US version. And it will take us a couple months to get there, but we are working on that to ensure that it is more based on the US perspective. But so we talk about farming facts, we talk about farmer mental health and the issues that they face. So we also follow through agriculture informed therapy, the Johannesson family. And so every module, you will follow the Johannesson family if you're interested in taking this training and to understand how the concepts that we're talking about apply to a real life kind of family. Our second module is honoring our history of marginalized farmers. And so we talk about BIPOC populations, Indigenous, LGBTQ2S+, and then women in ag as well. This is a pretty long module. We've jammed a lot of information into it. So just know that there are some of these areas that could be covered in more detail, and we don't get an opportunity to do that. But it is really helpful. One of the things that we do talk about in this module is understanding how to provide services to marginalized populations. When we talk about the issue around resilience, we've come to have to depend on this reservoir of resilience of minoritized populations. And so part of the work as therapists in agriculture is understanding how we need to adjust our or the work that we do so that we're not exhausting that reservoir of resilience. Somebody had just mentioned kind of divorce. One of the things that's difficult is that re-entry into the workplace with little experience compared to lived agriculture experience. There's a selling off of assets. So what we find with a lot of rural women, when they get married and they come onto the farm, they are often kind of expected to move into the farm the way it is currently established. Women are responsible for both primary, secondary, and tertiary responsibilities. So primary means I go out and I feed the sheep. I go out and I nurse this, and I drive the grain cart, and I cultivate, or I swath, or like all of those different pieces. So women are doing those primary roles. We're also responsible for secondary roles. So we will run and get ag equipment, or we will fill out book work, or we do those kind of secondary, not necessarily primary where we're working, but all of those secondary that the farm could not function without. And then we also do tertiary, which is all of those pieces around supporting the farm family and supporting the extended family. So all of the schooling pieces and, making the meals and caring for the in-laws and setting up the doctor's appointments and all of those other things. A lot of times in rural life, we will have women who say, oh, well, my husband's a farmer. And one of our challenges is to say, wait a minute, let's reevaluate that. You might have different roles on the farm, but are you both farmers? Because we really look to unite that relationship, if at all possible, or if desired. Now, when it comes to divorce, one of the things to be aware of, as I mentioned, the intimate partner violence is higher in rural areas. And in many, depending on your jurisdiction, depending on your local laws in Canada, what happens is if he's charged and sent to jail, she isn't getting child support during that time. The other thing that happens is if you have a corporation, granddad might own 90% of the shares in the corporation, you might only have 2. And so what can look like a farmer's not making any money because he's part of a farm corporation, we really have to rely on some forensic accounting to go through when it comes to settling out child support and that sort of thing. The other piece is most judges don't likely have farm experience, and so they're unable to adequately assign the value of the work that one spouse does, for instance, sweat labor and how that spouse contributes. And so it's important for farm families to be aware and, you know, of this kind of vulnerability. Module 3, we talk about stigma, identity, and barriers to receiving care. History of stigma, the identity crisis, and we go into those details when a farmer kind of has tattooed across the forehead, I'm a farmer, I'm nothing else. How do we grow that sense of identity? We talk about the farm wife and the perception of professionals, like I talked about in the earlier presentation. We do talk about losing the family farm because we have had folks that have come to us who have said, you know, I'm losing my 5th generation farm, and I went and saw the therapist, and the therapist said, it's no big deal, just save up a little bit of money and buy another farm. And I'm sure that causes you to gasp, because it does me. Losing a generational farm is very challenging, and that is happening in much higher numbers in the US right now than we've seen in historical back into the 1980s crisis anyway. Certainly some of the dairy industry in the US up through the New England states and in, you know, Minnesota and Wisconsin and certainly in Wisconsin, some of those areas, we've seen a lot of dairy farms have to sell off their farms. And it's painful, and it's important for us to have therapists who can walk through with them on that journey. I'm kind of just breezing through this. I'm happy to answer questions at the end. One of the pieces is, how can we provide culturally informed care and expanding folks' identity beyond? How do we really support farmers to ensure they can thrive? Now, module number 4 is experience in agriculture community. We talk a lot about diagnosis there and building a therapeutic relationship, how to do that effectively with farmers. We do talk about self-disclosure. We do talk about dual relationships and some of our really critical pieces regarding ethics. In module 5, we talk about chronic stress and the impact of trauma. So we do again talk about chronic stress, burnout, farmer suicide, on-farm accidents. All of those pieces are explored in great depth. You can see I've breezed over a few of these with you earlier today. Module 6, this is the stuff nobody talks about. So that's kind of along in the question that was asked earlier: intimate partner violence, alcohol, substance use, the migrant worker experience as well. Oftentimes in media, the migrant worker experience has gotten a really negative connotation, and we see a lot of really successful migrant worker relationships across Canada and the US. And so it's important that we bring that to light as well. Module 7, we talk about the different perspectives and experiences in agriculture. So the young farmers, the older farmers, the multi-generational farms, again, women in ag, from a little bit of a different perspective. How do we build communication skills? Those are all thoroughly discussed, which leads us into the next module. Sorry, you're gonna see a video there, which is about succession planning. And as you mentioned earlier, succession planning causes a lot of difficulties, a lot of stress among folks. And so we talk about why succession planning avoided, how do we start planning, how do we do this effectively? We bring into it some specific tools. As you heard earlier, we developed the Bee Farm Well app, and within that app, there's actual videos that you as therapists or as allied health professionals or as farmers yourselves can watch those videos, and it provides some structure for you, even in, you know, shareholder agreements and things such as that. Sorry. Tier 3, cultivating self-compassion. This is one of the leading research drives in agriculture. How do we help farmers develop self-compassion? Typically, what we see in farmers is we deal with a lot of unhelpful guilt. That unhelpful guilt motivates us to address worry, but it actually cultivates anxiety at the same time. Trying to meet those unrealistic expectations, we use anxiety to force ourselves to continue to try and meet those expectations. We get burnt out because we never actually reach those expectations. And so we use this 3 systems model of emotion to help farmers engage in a form of self-compassion. Module 10, experiential therapeutic approaches. So we talk about we talk about horticultural therapy, we talk about on-farm visits, we talk about experiential therapy. How can we integrate the two? This is one of our ram lambs, and in an earlier picture in some of the training that I had done, he was turned sideways, and I had a therapist who had only grown up in the city, and she had said, I can't tell. How can you tell that's a boy or girl? And so it's important to understand that there's really a tremendous gap between the producers and the consumers. And that's why it's so important that each of you are even on this call today. And so I'm so thankful that you have that interest. Lastly, we're getting down, we talk about resilience and the values that are ascribed and how those values work to add to the development of authentic resilience. Really important. And lastly, we look at social change. We look at health promotion, social justice, and how to promote those grassroots conversations and how to impact your community. So that brings us to the last of the, our AIT kind of outline. I'm just going to go back and stop sharing and see if we have any questions or if there's an area that you would like me to go over. I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, everybody feel free to unmute if you would like to ask a question, or I'll watch the chat if you're not able to talk. We really do thank you so much for being able to fill in the last half of that hour. Stuff happens and we'll find out what happened, but thank you for being that person. So much of what you said just goes along with everything that the AgriStress project talks about and stands for. And it just like it makes me so excited to hear somebody else talking about the exact same things. We're so passionate over here. Anybody have any questions for Loren?
I apologize too. I see in the note, it's Land Rich Cash Poor by Brian Retzinger. And Brian's fantastic individual. In fact, you could reach out to Brian. He would love to have a conversation with you for sure. Any questions? I know I was kind of breezing through that. It felt like pretty quickly.
Lauren, I just want to say that this has been truly tremendous. I just watched you, I think, yesterday on another webinar, and that was very informational on a lot of apps and stuff like that. But my big thing is I've been a mental health therapist for over 20 years in rural communities, and I just began kind of an educational thing, Rhino Resilience, where I focus on a lot of building that true resilience. So when you describe kind of the definition and having it more multifaceted instead of just a traditional grind through, push through kind of stuff. I really love that because I'm really focused on trying to help people for the long haul and not just push through and grind yourself to a grave. So I really appreciate you did a tremendous job.
You're right on. And actually, I recognize your name, and I was like, "Oh, I think I've talked to him already. I know you were on the call yesterday." It's an understandable misconnotation when people talk about resilience. Like I get why people misunderstand it, but unfortunately, unless if we're really generating authentic resilience, we're generating this push through resilience, right? We're generating coerced resilience. And I use an example. And Beck Seeds is amazing. So I feel bad whenever I show their video, but they have a video, and it's a great video. As farmers, we watch it, we're like, rah, rah, rah. It's not a 9-to-5 job. It's get the job done. You get dirty. And it shows them taking a sledgehammer, to a time clock, that kind of thing. And then in the other video, I show one from a fella, he's known as the Resilient Farmer in Australia. And he talks about, what did I do? I started going for walks with my neighbor, and I make sure whenever I'm doing large jobs, I'm shearing, I have more than one person there. So I'm not isolated. So there's all of these different strategies he used. And that's how we really demonstrate the difference between coerced resilience and authentic resilience. But I'm excited to hear more about your work, Chris. Nearing 80s and planning what to do.
So Heidi, can you clarify? She says what video? So I don't know if that's something that Loren said or if that's something that Chris had mentioned. Can you clarify, Heidi, if you're still on? Loren, she says, what video were you talking about?
Smash the Clocks. It's done by Beck Seeds. It's called Resilient. Let me look it up for you. I'll put it in the chat box here. Just give me 1 second.
We'll make sure we send that out per email too.
It's called a farmer's resilience. I'll probably start playing just a second. There we go. So this is the video, and as a farmer, when you watch it, you're like, yeah, get the job done. But when we're looking at talking about the difference between coerced resilience and authentic resilience, this is a really good demonstration of what coerced resilience kind of can look like. So yeah.
That's excellent. What website can we share with everybody? Like if they want to get in touch with you or like see your work?
So I just typed in there in the chat. It's nfmha dot. It's actually also .org, I believe. It will take you to our website, and the Bee Farm Well app is also beefarmwell.org, I believe. But you can contact us through there. We're really appreciative of so many of the US folks who are showing us lots of grace that our material is still too Canadianized, and they're still willing to jump on board and continue to develop. And so we do have a number of therapists in Colorado and Virginia. Becky's on the call, and we have a few in Wisconsin, Minnesota. Yeah, and so we would love to hear from you. There is a discount code actually for you today. I believe it's 20 off bundle. Yeah, I believe it's 20 off bundle. I'll put that in the... And if by chance that doesn't work, just reach out to me and I will email you the... Oops, sorry, I spelled that wrong. 20 off bundle. There we go. I believe that will work for you today. I know I had Jesse, he's our IT fella, and he was the one that created it for you. And so it will give you 20% off the training. The training is expensive. It's $1,197 right now. You get 20% off that, but it does give you continuing education credits, and it allows you to receive referrals as they come in too. So I think probably, yeah.
We do have one comment from Jacob that I'd like to share with you. He said, "Thank you for your presentation. As a second generation cattle and sheep farmer, this subject is near and dear to my heart, as my parents are nearing 80 and planning on what to do with the farm, as he is the only surviving child."
Yeah, thank you, Jacob. It is so true. So very true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And good for you to be willing to sit at that table. I think so often we have families that don't sit down at that table to have those conversations, and we kind of walk away and hope for the best because they're hard conversations. So good for you.
Yeah, hard and uncomfortable, that's for sure. But
right, yeah.
Definitely needs to be done.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
All right. If we don't have any other questions for Lauren, we'll go ahead and end. I have all of her information, and we'll send that out in the email that will go in the next 24 hours. And I think, Lauren, you were going to send either a website or slides or something. I'll wait to send that until we get that from you, but we'll make sure we get all the information out to you guys. And then also the recording of the meeting will come as well, so that you can either rewatch it or share it with any colleagues that you think might benefit. So Lauren, thank you so much. And everybody, thank you again. We will see you on July 1st.
Thanks so much, everyone.
See ya.